we are going to be looking at what is literary criticism. In the previous video, we saw what is criticism, and now we are going to take it a step further and we are going to look at criticism in the context of literature. So, literary criticism basically is the comparison, the analysis, the interpretation, and or the evaluation of works of literature. So basically, it is an assessment of literary texts. The critic approaches the text and the critic gives their opinion about the text. So it is basically the critic assessing or judging the text. Now, obviously, this kind of assessment has to be supported by evidence. And that is where the theoretical framework comes in. So there are a set of rules and there are a set of principles of criticism which we are going to be looking at later. And all of this determines the or forms the foundation of the evidence that the critic has to offer when the critic talks about a literary text. For example, if the critic appreciates something in the text, then the critic has to substantiate it or give proof of why this particular aspect of the text or this particular element is a good point or a strong point of the text. And similarly, if the critic is pointing out flaws or shortcomings in the text, similarly, the critic has to offer evidence that, okay, the text doesn't meet these expectations or it doesn't go by these rules. So, that is how shortcomings and strengths of texts are put across by critics, and these strengths and weaknesses are related to the theme, the style, the setting of the text, or the historical or political context. Sometimes it may not be only limited to appreciation of a text or critique of a text. Sometimes it could be the critic's observations also. That the critic starts making observations about the socio-cultural milieu in which the text was produced. The critic makes interesting observations about the society, the influences of the society in which the text was produced, or the writer's personal life and the events that happened in his personal life, which went on to influence the text, or the writer's personal likes and preferences. Sometimes the critic also may take into account the objective of the text, why the text is being written. Sometimes the critic could be measuring the appeal of the text, or whether the text has a local appeal or whether it has a universal appeal. So generally, texts that have a universal appeal are considered to be superior to texts that have a local or a regional appeal. Similarly, for example, sometimes the critic can look at the treatment of characters, and sometimes the critic can even look at things which the author may not have intended to convey through the text, but it gets conveyed unwittingly, not explicitly, but implicitly. So the critic looks at the underlying meaning, the underlying intent of the text. Is it a political text? What kind of politics was in practice back then? Is the author under the influence, or is the author under some kind of pressure to produce this kind of a text, or is the author propagating some different philosophy? Like, for example, if you look at the romantic poets, you will see that they broke away from tradition. So and whether it was their creative works or their critical assessment of works, the romantic writers, the romantic poets, the romantic critics followed a very different line of criticism. So, all in all, literary criticism refers to an interpretation and evaluation of literature. And for this, it is based on literary theory. Now, literary theory, there are different kinds of literary theories. which are determined by different kinds of literary perspectives, and these